Governor Rauner delivers a campaign address about courage and understanding, but Democrat J.B. Pritzker says the governor has shown cowardice and lied. We'll talk about it next on Capitol View. Welcome to Capitol View, the program where we talk about state issues, sometimes federal issues, and how they just might affect your life. I'm Bernie Schoenburg from the State Journal-Register. The campaign season is here. We've known that for a while, and we're less than 2 months from the November 6th election. Here to talk about various developments with me, Charlie Wheeler is back. He is director of the Public Affairs Reporting Program at University of Illinois Springfield, was a longtime State House reporter for the Chicago Sun-Times. Welcome back, Charlie.
Thank you, Bernie. It's always fun to be here.
And Dave Dahl is here. He is a State House reporter for WTAX Radio in Springfield. Thanks for being back, Dave.
Bernie, thank you.
Okay, the governor, late in the week, put on a tie, which isn't always the case at his public events, and was at, I believe it's a hotel in Chicago, and delivered remarks, and it was a half-hour speech.
A hotel where they were on strike.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, interesting. There was a room full of people who were clearly supporters of the governor. They cheered a lot at things he said, but he was trying to frame the way the campaign is going. He talked about courage and understanding. He said he has shown courage and gained some understanding. He tried to change government when he got in, and he thought maybe he tried to do everything at once and it didn't work, and he has learned that you have to work with others. And he said, and I quote, "I've learned to listen," was one of the things. But then he also said, Mike Madigan, the Speaker of the House, has blocked everything I do, and J.B. Pritzker would be a terrible governor for various reasons. Charlie, your thoughts on, it was kind of an interesting, it was kind of I think he was trying to get out of it what you get out of a political convention, for example. This was a set speech, here we go. Useful at this point in the campaign, just less than 60 days before the election.
I'm not sure what he tried to accomplish by that, if he was trying to reach out to folks who think that he's badly mishandled the job, and he's saying, well, I'm sorry, yeah, I screwed up, and I'll do better next time. His comment about courage, I guess, is in the eye of the beholder. And in the governor's mind, him sticking up for what he wanted, for his way, that was courage, when he refused to compromise. Other people would just call it, I don't know, mule-headed stubbornness.
Understood. He did say that he lost sleep some during the budget impasse because he was thinking about the effects it was having on people. On the other hand, he didn't sign a budget for a couple of years.
Yeah, he lost sleep.
The third one.
What about the people who couldn't get their needed medication, or couldn't get substance abuse help, or couldn't get help from a domestic abuse shelter? What about the kids who couldn't go to college because they couldn't get MAP grants? You know, it's nice that he feels sorry for all these people and he lost sleep, but there was real suffering going on during that budget impasse, which basically was driven by the governor's desire to reform the state's workplace, in essence, to weaken the power of labor unions and strengthen the hands of corporate management. And he made a comment about how he came from a business sector and he had all these tools and he thought outside the box. I'm thinking to myself, well, maybe somebody from the business sector isn't the best guy. Maybe you want somebody who was not in management telling other people what to do, but appreciated the fact that government in Illinois and all the states is kind of a community enterprise. You have to deal with the other branches, right? You have to deal with the legislature, and if the majority in the legislature is of a different party and of a different mind than you, you don't be courageous and say, I'm not going to yield. You try and sit down and find common ground.
He said, with regard to the budget impasse, and I do not quote directly, we all let you down.
Yeah, and I've got that quote right here. I know the budget impasse was painful. It kept me up at night worrying about the disruption that many families experienced. All of us elected officials let you down in that struggle.
That's the closest he came to admitting a specific mistake or to apologizing. He said if he's guilty of anything, it's of having too much courage, but what has he learned? What mistakes is he admitting?
Yeah,
What's he really going to do differently? And I think the timing of this whole thing is quite odd.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting that he talked about, he has learned that you have to share opinions with others and sit down, and yet it was he who, claiming he was miffed or whatever, Speaker Madigan not talking in leaders' meetings or whatever, just didn't go to leaders' meetings for, I believe there was an entire year that the governor did not attend a meeting with the leaders. Now, I don't know if that's all his fault or their fault, but clearly the governor is the person who generally has those meetings in his office.
I think the governor is who we thought he was. I think he's shown us who he is over this entire term. And
who is that, Dave?
Well, to finish the thought, he's got some new tricks that he's learned, some new arrows in the quiver or what have you, new tricks in his trick bag. If he's going to spring those on us now, I mean, he's 62 years old. Now he's learned to listen. I think he's someone who says what he thinks you want to hear, largely like almost every politician we know.
Okay.
When he's in southern Illinois, he's hunting and fishing and for the Second Amendment, and when he's in the suburbs, he's pro-choice, et cetera. I think he's quite good, and I was just thinking not long ago, Bernie, you and I were there on Halloween 2013 when he spoke to the Sangamon County Republican Network, which used to have a monthly luncheon of a newsmaker, and he said, or I said to him, what's it going to be like when you work with Madigan and Cullerton after you spend all this time running down the legislature? And he said, oh no, I want to get to know all the lawmakers. I want to work with Madigan and Cullerton. And right then and there, I thought, it was the first time I met him, right then and there I thought, this guy's a shapeshifter.
A who?
Shapeshifter? Because he's running all around the state saying how crummy the legislature is and how he's going to kick him in the butt and all this. Mm-hmm. And now he shows up in Springfield wanting to get along with people. It's classic.
It was interesting, I thought, that he criticized J.B. Pritzker for not facing the media, but that when you're governor you have to answer questions, and yet the governor, in many of his public appearances, it says on the notice that we as reporters get, no additional media availability, meaning he will not take questions at that event. And when he does take questions, very often it's about 6 minutes from the gathered reporters, and then they say last question, he takes it, he walks away. I should at this point just say, during his speech that he gave, which was broadcast over Facebook, and I'm sure there's a lot of news coverage that will be coming out on it, or that has come out on it by the time people see the show. The Pritzker people were doing rapid response. They were saying, oh, he says this, but he hasn't cooperated and he's had these problems. And a key statement from J.B. Pritzker said this, let's see, Bruce Rauner's problem isn't that he's had too much courage, it's that he spent 4 years refusing to compromise, hell-bent on forcing his radical agenda on our state no matter the collateral damage. Forcing bipartisan legislators to override your budget veto after 2 years of pain and destruction is not courageous. I won't go on, but you get the idea. So there's clearly different ways to look at this. So
let me ask a quick question. Did the governor take questions after the speech?
I don't know that he did, but the Facebook feed from Springfield stopped. I will also say that I think when the governor says that J.B. Pritzker is not facing the press, I think that means Pritzker, I think rather interestingly, recently said that he would not appear before the Chicago Tribune editorial board. The Chicago Tribune, in its the way it endorses candidates in recent years, they have all the candidates for an office in at the same time. They like to talk to them, put them face to face, and sometimes they even broadcast that live over Facebook or whatever other way.
Did Rauner in the primary. That was the one time those two were together.
Right, and Jeannie Ives was there, and then of course Bruce Rauner used her statements about just naming Mike Madigan to run ads, saying that Jeannie Ives, the very conservative Republican from Wheaton, was Mike Madigan's favorite Republican and in cahoots with him, which she said was a lie, and she still hasn't reached an agreement with Rauner about endorsing him since then. She says she'll vote for him. So what do we think of but J.B. Pritzker, for example, on Democrat Day at the State Fair, when all the Democrats were in town and gave speeches and then there was a press conference, J.B. Pritzker came to sit in front of reporters, including 15 or 20 of us, including many from Chicago, and took questions with Juliana Stratton there for 20 minutes, which was pretty long and pretty exhaustive. It's like he was trying to answer every question. And I have to say that that's something Governor Rauner doesn't often do. So I don't know where this all goes, but I think that when the governor was saying Pritzker was avoiding the press, it was the Tribune. What do you think of the governor not going before the Tribune editorial board, Charlie? Being a good Sun-Times guy, so you can bash that newspaper that used to be across the street.
Right. I suspect Pritzker looked at it this way. I have only so many hours before the election. How do I want to invest that time? Do I want to go and spend time in a situation where I know that no good will come of it, that I'm going to get rough treatment, that no matter what happens, these guys are so much in the tank for Bruce Rauner, there's no way in God's green earth that they would ever endorse me.
And we, of course, are talking about the editorial page of the Tribune, because I know
of
we all
course,
know
which is-
reporters on
which
the
is
Tribune who
totally
do
different,
a
totally
fair
different.
job, I think, of reporting on the race and
the
taking
Tribune
on Pritzker,
reporters
taking on Rauner,
are
et cetera.
A plus.
Okay.
They're excellent. It's the editorial board that, in my judgment, has already committed themselves to, in a sense, being in Bruce Rauner's back pocket on this election. So I can see Pritzker saying, I don't want to do that. Plus, there'll be media there and cameras, and if I do say something stupid, sure as shoot, it'll be in the commercial. So I'll go out and just talk to people.
Yeah, it won't be just in the news, it'll be in one of Rauner's commercials,
Yeah.
whether it makes sense or not.
Well, that all goes on for a while. One of the things, speaking of media, there was somebody named Jeremy Hobson who came through Springfield and Illinois this last week. He does the show Here and Now on NPR radio, did some stories about Illinois politics. Apparently the governor, they couldn't get the governor to be on the show, or it did not get arranged, but Pritzker did an interview with him, and they were talking about taxes in Illinois and the burden, I think, of property taxes, and J.B. Pritzker said, well, really the problem with property taxes is that the state should be providing more money to schools, K through 12 in particular. They should be paying about half. It should be half from the state, half property taxes. The problem, of course, is that, as you folks know, the state used to pay, the Constitution says the state should be the predominant funder of education. That hasn't happened as long as you or I have been doing this, and I've been doing it about 40 years. And
More than that for me.
yeah, I know. And
I was there when they wrote it.
that's right, at the Constitution, right. It used to be up about 38% the state funded. Now it's down about 25 or 26%. So if you want the state to pay more, because property tax and federal funding makes up the rest, mostly property tax. So Charlie, it would be billions of dollars that you'd have to funnel in, have the state raise and pay for schools even to do that. So I know Mr. Pritzker is kind of saying it, I guess, as a goal to have. But that, again, talks of spending and may feed into the Rauner campaign's hands of he just wants to raise your taxes and spend more money.
Yeah, and that's pretty simplistic, because part of what Pritzker is saying is that if the state put more money into our public school system, if we were even equal to what other states do without going out of our way, Hawaii pays the whole thing. There are other states where 2/3 or more of the funding for public education, K-12, comes from the state's coffers. And what he's saying is if we were to put more money in, then property taxes could go down. And years ago, all the way back in 1997, Jim Edgar proposed, depending on how you look at it, the largest income tax increase or the greatest property tax relief ever. He had a plan to raise income taxes to bring in, I think it was $1.5 billion more. 900 million of it would go to school districts, but for every dollar that went to the local school districts, they would have to reduce their property tax levy by $1. The other 600 million was going to go to the poor districts, the ones that had low property values and needed additional help. That plan never went anywhere, despite the fact that in the House, Michael Madigan, the Speaker, and the majority Democrats pushed it through to the Republican-controlled Senate, where it was sent to a committee, never to emerge again. And so if you're seriously thinking, in my mind, if you're thinking about reducing property taxes, because better than 60% statewide of property taxes go to K-12, then you have to deal with that issue. And one way to do it without hurting the resources available for our local kids is to bring down the property tax, replace it with state dollars, be they from an income tax, expanded sales tax base, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
So I think what Pritzker is saying, in my mind, it makes a lot of sense if you're serious about dealing with property taxes.
And I think correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Pate Phillip was the leader of the Senate at the time, and the Republicans, and they didn't like that plan. And when Jim Edgar pushed it, it was after he had won election over Don Clark Netsch. He had won a second term, and Don Clark Netsch had proposed a similar plan during the 1994 campaign, saying, I want to raise income taxes and lower property taxes. And Governor Edgar, in the political season, ran ads saying she wants to raise your taxes 42%. And if I recall, Governor Edgar won 101 of 102 Illinois counties on that anti-tax message, but then he did something, he would argue that there are some subtle differences, but it was a very similar plan, increase income taxes. So this is the problem that
was that he appointed a study committee headed by ULI President Stan Eichenberry.
Right.
And they studied the issue and they came back and said, hey, guess what?
This is what we ought to do.
Yeah.
Very interesting. So, Dave, on the tax question, PolitiFact Illinois took a look at something recently, and that's an organization that's kind of national but has an Illinois base and runs with the Better Government Association. Took on something that Governor Rauner has been saying about J.B. Pritzker. Pritzker says that a key part of his plan to bail out the state or to get the state on good financial footing is to go to a progressive income tax, but you would need a constitutional amendment, so it would take a while to get there. And he wants rich people like he and Bruce Rauner to pay more, and he claims that most people would pay less, but he won't put out the rates, maybe because of the Don Clark Netsch kind of trap, where if you say the high rate, then you'll get attacked for the high rate. But regardless, he is catching a lot of heat, Mr. Pritzker, for not saying what the rates would be. So the Governor Rauner, has said in every state that they have a progressive tax, the middle class, pays more. And PolitiFact found that there are, I think it was 11 states where a lot of people in mid-range of income pay less. And so they said the governor that it was a false statement. Will that change the debate at all, Dave? Or I see the same kind of thing going on anyway.
I think it's interesting that you use the word the debate, because I think that's one big reason why J.B. Pritzker was in front of all of us on Democrat Day during Fair Week. That's about the last we've seen from him in terms of question and answer. He's not doing a solo question and answer with anyone, and he's not going to be before the Chicago Tribune, and so he's not going to be getting that question, what are the rates, et cetera. And what I think the problem here is for the sake of this argument, let's say the three of us are not wealthy. And I think what we're worried about,
pretty safe to say.
We're worried about is if the rates come out, oh gosh, the three of us turn out to be in a far higher class than we thought we were. I had no idea we were so wealthy. But we don't know that because, and this is something I've attempted to ask J.B. Pritzker, so I'd ask it to his face. And another thing, you got to know that he's penciled it out somewhere, how much money it's going to take to run Illinois, properly fund education, this, that, the other. How many billions of dollars do we need, and what's it going to take to get us there? He says, we have to negotiate with the General Assembly, whoever wins. What's really going to happen with regard to a progressive or graduated income tax, if it even gets through the legislature, the victory will go to whoever writes the amendment that goes onto the ballot. And then we, the people of Illinois, would have to approve it. So it's a long, 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 long way from reality.
Right. And sometimes the amendment can just say that you allow that, and then you can pass the legislature passes a law to set the rates.
Yeah, because
right, Charlie?
And that's what it would be, because the revenue article right now says that any income tax has to be at a non-graduated rate.
Right.
And depending on how it's amended, it
just
could
remove that.
Yeah, just remove it. So it could be whatever.
Right.
Or they could try to put in a certain schedule. My guess is the simplest way is just to remove that, leave it an open-ended question, and then allow the legislature to do it. But it can happen in the ideal, the best of all possible worlds for people who believe in this notion. It can't happen before January of 2021.
Yeah, interesting. I will say that J.B. Pritzker did face the editorial board at the State Journal Register in this last week, was asked a question about this in many different ways, and he basically said the general basics, rich people pay more, middle class people pay less, most taxpayers, but did not get specific, and that videos of all of the SJR governor candidates will be released once all of them have been before the editorial board. That's the policy that they're using.
Well, on that issue, just for the heck of it, last spring, I decided to take a look at what the income tax rates and levels were in all our surrounding states. And at that time, everybody had a graduated tax but Indiana. But Indiana also has a local sales tax, or I'm sorry, a local income tax, which we don't. Kentucky this past spring moved to go to a flat rate tax, and to make up for suspected revenue losses, they also increased business taxes, started taxing a lot of services they hadn't before. There were a lot of changes in there. But I took what I figured would be a typical Illinois family. I looked at median household income, which in 2016, the latest year available from the Census Bureau, was roughly $61,000. And I figured there's 2 adults, 2 kids, $8,000 in personal exemption. Taxable income is about $53,000, so they pay roughly $2,600, $2,700. If we adopted the entire framework from Wisconsin, rates, brackets, exemptions, deductions, that family would pay roughly $500 to $600 less. So it's not enough just to talk about the rates or the brackets. What other exemptions or deductions are there? In Missouri, the top rate of 5.9% kicks in for every dollar in excess of $9,072. And so you think, oh my goodness, they're really hitting the lower income people. But their deductions and exemptions are so great that, again, this typical Illinois family would have its income, taxable income, cut in half. And so they'd wind up paying roughly $1,000 less, even with the higher rate in Missouri than they do here. So it's not enough, as I say, if you're going to study this, don't just look at rates, don't just look at levels. What are the exemptions? What are the deductions? What are the ways built in to mitigate the impact on people of lesser means, while at the same time trying to generate as much money possible from the Pritzkers and the Rauners of the world?
I think you're trying to say it's not easy to explain this stuff in a 30-second
No,
ad.
it's not.
And that
I'm sorry that I rambled on
and
like
maybe
that,
people
but it's
shouldn't
not.
believe everything they hear in 30-second ads on either side.
No.
I
I mean, that's not any more than you should believe if you see the beer commercial and there's some guy sitting there swilling or whatever, and you see these beautiful looking women surround him. You go home and you drink that beer, it ain't gonna happen.
Very
They're
interesting.
selling a lifestyle, Charlie.
That's right. Interesting.
Yeah, right.
Perhaps
And
we.
that's what the ads are too, right?
Exactly.
A big political story, just shifting gears a little bit, a big political story in the state is the fact that Rahm Emanuel recently announced that he's not running for mayor of Chicago. As we do this today, we know that Tony Preckwinkle, who chairs the Democratic Party in Cook County and also the president of the Cook County Board, seems to be gearing up to run for mayor. There's lots of people in the mix. Susana Mendoza, our state comptroller, who is running for re-election for comptroller, has not taken her name out of it that we know of. This may give some hope and certainly a talking point to Darlene Sanger, the Republican running for comptroller this November, saying, I'll serve 4 years, maybe Susana Mendoza won't. Either one of you, will that have any effect on the race for comptroller, do we think, as November 6th approaches?
So Darlene is going to change all of the television advertising she's running to reflect that message.
I don't know. I know what you're saying is she has not much money and has not been running those ads.
Yeah, her campaign is somewhat low profile.
It is that, and she.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to have any material effect, in the sense that Susana Mendoza has piled up a pretty good record in terms of bringing transparency to the office, being able to work with the General Assembly. She had a handful of bills that made what I would call more administrative type changes, but provided greater understanding of what the state's true fiscal picture was. The governor, well, they passed the legislature with overwhelming bipartisan majorities. The governor vetoed them a year ago. They all were overridden. So she's someone who I believe is doing a very good job as comptroller. Plus, as a candidate, she's dynamic, she's got charisma, a lot of personality.
And she's a
hard
soccer
worker.
player. No, she went to college on a soccer
I know,
scholarship.
and you played soccer, so.
Anyway, but that's fine.
But yeah, and plus she's a Hispanic at a time when probably the largest growing ethnic population in Illinois is people who identify as Latino. And so she's got a lot going for her. The fact that she may run for mayor, may or may not, and if she does and gets elected, then she would have to leave in spring of 2020. I'm not sure that's, I'm sorry, of 2019, next spring. I don't think that's going to weigh overwhelmingly in people's minds.
Interesting. By the way, I think you wrote about these other states and their taxes on, was that on NPR Illinois? Is that where that would be available online?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I could put a plug in, right?
I just did for you.
Thank you.
I should mention at the end, and we can't say too much about it, I noticed on Capitol Facts, Rich Miller's blog, that Jerry Long, a state representative from Streeter, is a Republican from Frank Montino's old district, who's the Auditor General of Illinois. And for some reason about his personal behavior, Republicans have withdrawn support. I don't know what that means, but in the Me Too era, we can't say too much, but I don't know, Dave, if you want to say, this is a district that I'm sure Republicans were hoping to keep, and now this may give the Democrat a better chance.
Yeah, I don't know any more about it than you do, and it's awfully late to slot a new Republican and try to get them in, if indeed that is what happens. And that's certainly what Leader Durkin wants. Durkin wants Long out of there.
Yeah, and the notice came from Leader Durkin's office, the head of the Republicans in the House, that we were withholding support. So we'll see what happens from here on. We're going to have to end it there for now, but keep watching. Lots of campaigning is going on. Charlie Wheeler, thanks for your help. Dave Dahl, thanks for your conversation. I'm Bernie Schoenburg. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time on Capitol View.